to another economic and industry update presented by Greenbrier's marketing team. I'm Mallory Moran, and I'm joined, as always, by Jay Carter. Let's start with the overall economy. Jay, what are you saying?
Hey, Mallory, good to see you again. This quarter's headline news is around GDP, tariffs, and interest rates. Real GDP increased by 2.3% annually in the fourth quarter of last year, reflecting stable economic output. GDP for 2025 is expected to grow 2.2% and 2% in 2026. Now, when we think about manufacturing, the manufacturing PMI rose to 50.9% in January, materially beating expectations. This is the first positive inflection point after 26 consecutive months of contraction, suggesting some macro optimism in the industrial sector.
And of course, that PMI increase is great news, which is the Purchasing Managers Index. And that gives us a good view on prices, the output in the manufacturing sector. And so we love to see that on the upswing. But what about tariffs? How are those affecting things?
Glad you asked, Mallory. The new administration's policies and tariffs definitely create uncertainty. 10% incremental tariffs on China took effect in February, and tariffs on Canada and Mexico are expected to move forward in March. Though this could change, and this oscillating nature regarding tariff decisions is causing ripple effects throughout the economy, delaying capital expenditure projects, and raising the hurdle for Fed rate cuts.
Speaking of rate cuts, how is inflation playing into that uncertainty?
Sure, Mallory. So the headline CPI inflation accelerated a seasonally adjusted 0.5% during January, putting the annual inflation rate for headline inflation at 3% growth, both higher than expected. And the core CPI ran at 0.4% and 3.3% respectively. Now, in light of this CPI report, market consensus anticipates that the Federal Reserve will maintain its pause on interest rate reductions until approximately the third quarter of this year.
And for those that don't know, the CPI is the Consumer Price Index. So that's painting a broad picture of how inflation is affecting everyday Americans. Those are definitely some disappointing numbers, so we'll be keeping our eyes on that. Now let's turn to the railcar industry. Orders declined sequentially in Q4 2024 by 13% to 4,520 railcars. That's from nearly 5,200 in Q3. Deliveries totaled nearly 10,000 railcars, also down sequentially 6% from last quarter. The industry backlog now stands at just over 34,000 railcars, down about 14%. Jay, how are those numbers related to what's happening in the economy?
Yes, this softer rail car demand can be attributed to the tariffs that I mentioned earlier. New rail car demand for 2025 remains muted at about 35,000 units being delivered this year, which is really dominated by tank cars and covered hoppers.
Now, how is the railcar supply expected to impact traffic?
And so when we think about rail traffic, the total North American rail traffic is currently up about 2% year to date through mid February. Now, after falling 2.5% year over year in 2024, rail carloads are expected to rise 2.5% in 2025. And this comes from sustained increases in agricultural and chemical sectors and somewhat of a recovery among the industrial and energy related commodities that struggled last year. Now, that was carloads. When we talk about intermodal, intermodal is expected to grow this year at about 1.4% in 2025, which is down from its last year's growth, but still positive.
And what railcar commodities are likely to be impacted by the tariffs?
Tariffs are anticipated to adversely affect freight demand without a doubt, particularly for commodities such as automobiles. Additionally, retaliatory tariffs may further impact export dependent industries, including agriculture.
Now, what about utilization?
Well, Mallory, railcar utilization remains steady at around 80%, with roughly 322,000 industry rail cars that are currently sitting in storage. Now, when we look at this number, the actual surplus of rail cars is significantly lower than what is reported because many idle rail car types are likely candidates for retirement or they sit in repair shops awaiting repairs. Now, utilization in general has ranged between 80% and 82% for the past 2 years. And we're finally seeing indications that rail car utilization may start to soften due to softer rail car demand.
Any final thoughts, Jay?
So, Mallory, the uncertainty around tariffs is stalling new railcar demand, and it also weighs on the near term outlook. Consequently, the 2025 railcar delivery forecast has been adjusted downward to around 35,000 railcars being delivered in 2025, reflecting the risk and uncertainties posed by tariffs. With that being said, we remain observant and proactive as the industry navigates through the current cycle.
Thanks, Jay, and thank you all for watching. We hope that you found this video informative. Be sure to tune in for next quarter's edition.